There's something quietly unsettling about how easily people born in the 1990s let go of things. Jobs, cities, versions of themselves, even beliefs they once held with conviction. From the outside, it can look like detachment or restlessness, like a generation that refuses to settle down or commit. But if you've lived it, if you're part of it, it doesn't feel like rebellion at all. It feels like preparation, like muscle memory, like you learned early on that standing still wasn't safety, it was risk. Most people don't wake up one day and decide they'll be comfortable with uncertainty. That comfort is trained into you, slowly, through repetition, through watching the ground shift again and again until you stop assuming it will stay solid. And that's where the gap between generations really begins. Not in values or morals, but in the environments that shaped their nervous systems long before they had language for it. If you grew up watching adults build a life that made sense in a predictable world, stability felt natural. You stayed in one job, one city, one role, and over time, those things didn't just support your life, they became your identity. You were what you did. You were where you lived. You trusted that if you showed up consistently, the system would meet you halfway. And for a long time, it did. Change wasn't a constant companion, it was an interruption. Something that happened occasionally, often unwelcome. Something you recovered from and then returned to normal. But if you were a kid in the 1990s, your sense of normal was different from the start. Technology changed faster than adults could explain it. Entire industries rose and collapsed within a few years. You watched companies promise loyalty and then disappear overnight. You saw people who did everything right still lose stability they thought was guaranteed. You learned, without anyone explicitly teaching you, that permanence was fragile. Maybe it was watching your parents worry quietly about layoffs, or seeing neighbors pack up and leave because a factory closed or a company relocated. Maybe it was growing up alongside the internet, watching platforms dominate and then vanish, watching rules change mid-game. Whatever the specifics, the lesson was the same. Don't get too comfortable. Don't assume this version of reality will last. And when you're trained inside that kind of environment, you adapt in ways that aren't always visible. You stop tying your sense of self to any one structure. You learn to keep parts of yourself portable. Skills matter more than titles. Experiences matter more than promises. You don't expect stability to protect you, so you learn how to move. This is where misunderstandings start. To someone raised on consistency, this flexibility can look like a lack of commitment, like indecision, like an unwillingness to grow roots. But from the inside, it doesn't feel careless. It feels cautious. It feels like not putting all your emotional weight on something that could disappear without warning.
There's a quiet difference between building roots and staying mobile. Stability teaches you to dig in, to invest deeply in one place, one path, one identity. Instability teaches you to keep your bags half-packed, not because you want to leave, but because you know you might have to. And when you grow up with that awareness, change doesn't register as danger in the same way. It feels familiar, sometimes even neutral, occasionally reassuring, because movement means you're not stuck when things collapse. That's why so many people born in the 1990s hesitate to define themselves by a single role. Ask them who they are, and the answer is rarely just a job title. They've seen how quickly roles can be taken away, how companies can disappear, how external validation can evaporate. So they separate their worth from those things early, not as a philosophical exercise, but as emotional self-defense. Older generations often found meaning through continuity, staying with something long enough for it to shape you. Younger generations learn to find meaning in adaptability, in the ability to reinvent without seeing it as failure. When they change direction, it's not always because they're lost. Sometimes it's because staying would mean pretending the world hasn't changed when it clearly has. There's also something happening beneath the surface that rarely gets talked about. Repeated uncertainty changes how your body responds to the world. When unpredictability shows up again and again during formative years, your system learns to expect it. You become alert, flexible, ready to pivot.
Not because you enjoy chaos, but because you've learned that rigidity hurts more when things shift. For someone raised in long-held patterns, change can feel jarring. It breaks expectations that once kept life coherent. For someone raised in flux, Sameness can feel suspicious, too quiet, too still, like something is about to happen and you should be ready. Neither response is wrong. They're just conditioned differently. This difference shows up clearly in how commitment looks now. Loyalty used to be rewarded with security. Stay long enough and you'd be taken care of. But when that promise stopped being reliable, commitment had to move somewhere else, away from institutions and toward internal resources, skills you can carry, relationships you can rebuild, values that don't depend on a single system staying intact. So when a younger person leaves a job after a few years, it's not always because they're bored or entitled. Sometimes it's because they've learned that staying too long can be dangerous, that betting everything on one structure is a risk they're not willing to take. They commit, just differently, to growth, to learning, to staying employable rather than staying loyal. This is where generations often end up talking past each other, not because either side is unwilling to listen, but because they're translating reality through completely different reference points. One side looks at detachment and sees a lack of discipline, a refusal to commit, a fear of responsibility.
They remember a time when staying put was how you proved yourself, when endurance meant character. The other side looks at the same world and feels confusion, even disbelief. They wonder why anyone would hand their sense of safety to structures that have already shown they can disappear overnight. From their perspective, trusting blindly doesn't look virtuous, it looks risky. And both sides are right in their own way. They're not arguing ideas, they're defending lived experience, shaped quietly and repeatedly by very different worlds. What often gets missed in that clash is the cost of flexibility itself. Adaptability is praised like it's a superpower, but it comes with a tax that rarely gets acknowledged. Being ready to move all the time does something to you. Constant alertness, constant adjustment, constantly reading the room for signs of instability. It slowly wears you down. There's a kind of background fatigue that settles in when you never fully unpack, emotionally or mentally. Even in moments of calm, part of you is still listening for the other shoe to drop. You learn how to survive transitions, but you also carry a quiet tiredness that comes from never feeling completely at rest. For many people born in the 1990s, this creates a strange internal contradiction. They want roots. They want depth, continuity, something solid to lean into. They imagine it, crave it, sometimes even envy it when they see it in others. But wanting something and trusting it are two different things.
Roots require faith that the ground will hold, and that faith doesn't come usually when you've watched ground collapse before. So instead of fully committing, they hover, close enough to feel connected, far enough to pull away if necessary, half invested, half protective. Not because they're indifferent, but because caring deeply has come with consequences in the past. When things fall apart quickly enough times, your system remembers, even if your mind wants to move on. You can tell yourself that this time is different, that things feel stable now, but your body has learned caution. It remembers the shock of sudden change, the way certainty evaporated without warning. So it keeps a buffer, a little emotional distance, a plan B always running quietly in the background. This isn't pessimism, it's memory doing its job. That's why change can start to feel easier than stillness. Movement feels safer than standing on ground that might crack beneath you. Reinvention feels lighter than staying loyal to an identity that no longer matches the world you're navigating. There's relief in motion, even when it's exhausting. At least when you're moving, you're not waiting to be blindsided. Over time, this turns into a kind of quiet intelligence. Not loud confidence, not bravado, but an internal knowledge that you can adjust without falling apart, that you can let go without losing yourself, that you can survive the ending of one version of life and still recognize yourself in the next. From the outside, this can look like instability, like a lack of grounding.
But that label misses what's really happening. This comfort with change isn't random or shallow. It's adaptive. It's a response to unpredictability, not an absence of depth or loyalty. Detachment doesn't always mean you don't care. Sometimes it means you've learned, the hard way, not to confuse structures with security. They resisted because consistency worked. It rewarded patience. It built lives that felt coherent, dependable, and meaningful. Stability wasn't an illusion for them. It was a lived reality.
And 1990s kids didn't embrace change because it was trendy or exciting. They embraced it because standing still didn't feel safe, because flexibility was the only thing that reliably carried them through disruption. When you look at it through that lens, the tension softens. The moral judgments fall away. No one is wrong here. They were trained differently, conditioned by different rhythms of loss and reward, security and surprise. Both are carrying that imprint forward, often without realizing how deeply it runs. And maybe that's the most important thing to recognize. Our relationship with change isn't a personality quirk. It's not a flaw or a virtue. It's a memory, a record of what the world taught us was necessary to survive. Once you see that, compassion becomes easier. Conversations slow down. Judgment gives way to curiosity. You stop asking why someone is the way they are and start asking what shaped them. Because in the end, being comfortable with change isn't about liking instability. It's about knowing how to live inside it without breaking. And for those who grew up in a world that wouldn't sit still, learning how to move wasn't a choice. It was the only way to stay whole.